Welcome in Rose City to Soccer Made in Portland. Ryan Clark here with the newly married man, Chris Ryberg, on this beautiful Thursday morning here in the Pacific Northwest. Chris, welcome back. Congratulations to you and Jackie. How you feeling this morning? Unrelated, of course, to soccer.
Fantastic. Yeah, great. We got married. Everything was lovely. Got to spend some time with family and friends and the like, and then we went and hung out in Hawaii for like 5 days. So that was pretty awesome.
Sweet. Down in Dylan Gabriel country, as someone with Oregon football on
very
the mind.
Oregon football on the mind to take there. Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun that you guys got to go down there. Obviously, we're in the midst of our wedding planning.
I know you're
now,
next.
so yeah, we're next down in October. So that'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that with
you should
Emma,
be 12 out of 10 would recommend.
Getting married is dope. Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. Lot of soccer, obviously.
A lot of soccer, some of which I missed.
Lot of stuff.
It was an excused absence.
Some of it definitely an excused absence, I would say. There are more important things than the Portland Timbers and Thorns, contrary to popular belief. 3 games for the Timbers. We'll start there. 3-2 win over Minnesota. Late goal by Jonathan Rodriguez. 3-2 loss at FC Dallas. Late own goal by Christian Paredes. And a 4-1 win over Nashville that included 4 goals in an 11-minute period in the first half. So a lot on the field to talk about with the Timbers. And then obviously there will be a couple of storylines we can talk about off the field for the team. But just looking at those results and what you, I guess, were able to view during this period, what stands out? Obviously, that last and most recent game against Nashville, they didn't have Evander, and they still were able to produce some serious stuff with the ball, and are turning into one of the more formidable teams in MLS with the ball at their feet right now. So, just initial thoughts.
I mean, attack is white hot, and there's really not a guy on the team that's in that attack that's not on a heater right now. Whether it's Evander, whether it's Felipe Mora, whether it's Jonah Rodriguez, I mean, they're firing on all cylinders, and
yeah, all 3 of them have double-digit goals right now, which is
and
pretty
it's
remarkable.
Early in the season, and so those guys are lighting things up, and I mean, that is the 2 good results that they got over the course of that 3-game stretch, and so I mean, this is I think sort of the potential that we saw early in the year for this attack really kind of coming to fruition. There's a lot of talent there, and even when you take Evander off the field, I mean, Eric Williamson is the best backup 10 in MLS, right? To the point, and we'll talk about this later, where he's probably not going to be a backup 10 for a whole lot longer, because there are a lot of teams, frankly, that could use him and that can deploy him more effectively than the Timbers have. But look, I mean, you look around at the team. Santiago Moreno has started to look better in the last few weeks than he had previously. He's sort of getting back into it. It seems like maybe some of the transfer talk with him is starting to tamp down.
Yeah, and it seems like he stepped in really well for Evander in that game too, because he's somebody that has talked about wanting to be more of a number 10 at times in the past, and honestly, he did a good job. He's done a good job on the wing as well as natural position, but he's with Anthony having a hot start to the season and then sort of cooling off. What we've seen, I think, from Moreno has been really good the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so, I mean, when you have that many guys playing the way that those guys are, you're going to score a lot of goals, and the Timbers have scored a lot of goals. I mean, since we recorded last, they've scored 9. That's a lot of goals in a 3-game stretch. And so, I mean, there's nothing to say about that other than it's been fantastic. Of course, if you sort of dig into the individual games, you can sort of find reasons for why they took advantage. Nashville was terrible, looked disinterested. But we've seen a lot of games, frankly, in which an opponent shows up, looks a little bit flat. Maybe the Timbers get one, but the opponent kind of hangs around and it becomes a bit of a thing. There was none of that. 4 goals in 11 minutes, forget about it. We're done. And then a pretty ugly red card for Nashville, and then we're especially done. And the last hour of that game was kind of playing it out.
It was basically an hour of them trying to break the hat trick curse, which they were unsuccessful in doing. Once again, with multiple major opportunities, by the way, for Jonathan Rodriguez, which just the way people react on Twitter in particular, but just in general to
what's your curse vibe? Are you like desperate for the curse to be broken, or what's your vibe?
I think it's I'm good either way. Honestly, I think it's a funny thing to talk about. I would like it to be something that happens for the Timbers at one point, so that people can sort of get this proverbial monkey off their back with this situation.
Funny, though.
But it's hilarious. It's with all of the incredible goal scorers that this team has had in its MLS history, including on this present team, which is one of the better goal scoring teams in its history. It's kind of insane.
Yeah. This hasn't happened. It's one of those things that's just a total aberration. It's completely aberrational. Mm-hmm. It is not indicative of anything deeper with the Timbers. It doesn't reveal sort of an underlying flaw. The Timbers have scored a lot of goals since they've come to MLS. It is just completely and increasingly wildly statistically aberrational that this streak, this curse remains. And I think it's kind of funny. And so like my attitude about the curse, and why frankly I was like kind of enjoying the sort of like fate, various attempts to break the curse that fell short in like various and kind of funny ways. I was enjoying that because it's totally aberrational, and like I think the curse is funny. And I want the curse to be broken eventually, because that's what we do with curses, right? That's what we do with streaks. They get broken. But I kind of want it to happen in spectacular fashion. I want it to happen in like something that's a little bit more dramatic than Nashville showed up, didn't really show up, and we put 5 on them. They went down to 10 men. We pasted them with 5. It was kind of a whatever game. I want to do it against Seattle.
Yeah, it was almost
do it play some hero ball, beat Seattle 3-2 on a late winner that gets the hat. Do that. Not the interconference disinterested opponent thing, even though that is probably the most likely circumstance in which it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's a better opportunity for you to do it, but
if you're gonna have such a spectacular streak, let's have a spectacular end to the streak. So I was kind of like, I can live with this. This is pretty funny as it was sort of comically not getting broken.
I feel like any of those 3 guys in Mora, Rodriguez, and Evander could do it this year. Just given, where things are at with that attack and, how they're playing. A lot of guys who could have done it in the past part of the season. I know. It's so weird. If I'm remembering correctly, it has happened in U.S. Open Cup play
and CONCACAF Champions League play, which is hilarious because the Timbers have played many, many fewer U.S. Open Cup games and CCL games than they've played MLS games, and yet they have hat tricks in both of those competitions, but not in an official MLS game. It's great. It's really funny.
Curses are funny. There are obviously a few other storylines swirling around the Timbers right now. Beyond the curse, Dairon Asprilla transferred to Atlético Nacional down in Colombia, ending what was a really remarkable time with the Timbers. He had the game-winning assist against Minnesota, which was awesome. The sort of special thing that I think not only makes this club special, but the soccer community special is the ability to rally around this type of situation and support this specific guy. And you could see how hard he was running, not only for himself, but as a result of that support. I mean, he was busting his butt down the field the whole shift that he had down the stretch there. And he had multiple opportunities to get the game winning assist before eventually he found Rodriguez. So it was a nice sort of farewell to Dairon in a situation that I know for a fact was a little bit ugly, behind the scenes in terms of his relationship with the club. Usually those sort of things are, but given his importance to the club, I think it's unfortunate that things played out behind the scenes the way that they did. hopefully they can mend fences in ways that they've mended before with players that have departed. You think about, the rumblings around when Diego Valeri left the club, and his unhappiness with how things might have ended there. He's at games now every week. It seems like he was doing the drums in the Timbers Army for the Nashville game, and
when he's not calling Miami games,
when he's not calling it your Miami games for
basically Leo
for
Messi's personal broadcaster.
Yeah, which that's pretty dope. Him and Jake Ziven both.
Yeah, that's right. Ziven on the English language side, Valeri on the Spanish language side feel like they're increasingly just part of the team that calls Messi games.
Yeah, they should do a bilingual broadcast where it's just the two of them, just to give the Timbers a little nod.
I think it might be a bit of an ask. I have no idea what Jake's Spanish aptitude is, but might be a little bit of an ask to have him do a broadcast with Diego speaking Spanish at least part time.
He could just nod along and pretend.
That's right. I mean, it's Diego Valeri. You got a lot of confidence that whatever he's saying is like right and it's smart, and so you can just be like, yeah. I'm in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, correct. So yeah, I think that Dyrone had a great career here. Is somebody that the fans did a great job honoring, and now he will probably finish his career out in Colombia. And we'll see, from there how the Timbers sort of retool their roster in the coming weeks. There has been the reporting from Tom Bogert about the signing of a center back, New Zealand center back Finn Sermon from Australia in the A-League. He's not going to be a breakthrough signing. I think that's probably more of a depth or T2 guy, you would think, given the level of experience and talent they have at that position. But the other signing that Bogert's been reporting on that I think merits more discussion is that of a potential DP central midfielder, which we touched on it a little bit before, would mean the exit of Eric Williamson, just given the logjam that already exists at that position for the Timbers. Now, that's not to say Eric being transferred is a guarantee, but when stuff like that gets put out in the media, it pretty much is something that a team is exploring. You would have to imagine the Timbers are shopping Eric at this point to give him an opportunity elsewhere, because like you said, he's been effective in his moments, but he just doesn't fit into the lineup right now, given what you've got from Evander and what you've seen from David Ajala, and then obviously you bring in whoever that DP is to potentially scoot Diego Chara onto the bench. A lot of layers to it there, but a DP 6 or 8 seems to be the move right now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty smart. To sort of, I'll start with a quick note on Asprilla. We did talk about him last time out, and so we sort of had the deep dive already. But it was great to see sort of the way that came together, and credit both to the club and to the fans for helping make it come together, that he could really sort of get his flowers on his way out of the club. He's a guy who deserves it, period. And, I understand why things are always, or not always, but frequently difficult from the sort of negotiation perspective on the way out, and why there are some raw feelings. Those raw feelings are understandable, given the interests at play. But I mean, this is how it usually goes. That there's at least a little bit of ambivalence on, sort of at the end of a player's tenure with the club, when that the end of that tenure is toward the end of his career. And so it's sort of just a part of the business that's a little bit unfortunate, but it is appropriate, and it was correct, and it was a good thing that he was able to get the recognition from the fans and sort of have that special moment with that game-winning assist on his way out in his last game as a Timber. Because his legacy as a Timber is I mean, it's funny. It was a complicated arc. It certainly wasn't linear, but it's one that made it impossible not to root for him in the end. And he ended up making a significant impact across multiple seasons. And so he deserved those flowers, and he got them, which is a good thing. So moving, I guess, from the past to the future. This is going to be the next big, sort of transfer saga to follow for the Timbers, which is, you're right that I think they are at least somewhat connected, that the Timbers are looking to go out and to add in the 6-8 position, while at the same time they're looking to move Eric Williamson. I think you could probably justify those two moves independently, but in sort of the overall roster structure, I think you would say it makes sense. And the reason is the Timbers are over committed at the sort of 8-10 spot, and they're a little bit under at the 6-8 spot, right? I mean, ordinarily you're going to think of a more attacking minded midfielder when you're playing with the 3-player midfield, central midfield, which the Timbers have done very consistently. You're going to think of that as one spot ordinarily, right? And your 6-8 is kind of like two spots. They're a little bit more interchangeable, depending on the player and depending on the profile. But there are more teams playing with a sort of a normal orientation of a triangle than an inverted triangle. The Timbers have tried the inverted triangle, and it just really hasn't worked. I mean, what we've seen pretty consistently when the Timbers try to play Evander and Williamson together is that they don't get the most out of either. And it kind of just hasn't worked. And Eric Williamson is not a part-time player in MLS. It's just better than that, period. And so the Timbers are in a spot where they're underutilizing him. And they also are in a place where at the 6-8 position, even though they've got Diego Chara, they've got Cristian Paredes, and they've got David Ayala, I think you would say that for those two roles, they're a little bit light, right? Where I think we have reasonably seen now some aging for Diego Chara that, that makes it so that he's going to be an important person in the club and an important person in the team, but is he an in-pin starter anymore? I think the answer is no.
No, and I think the added layer to it is you've seen the way that they want to play with those two central midfielders, right? And you've seen it even with Diego on the field. They've had Diego up in some pretty prominent spots in the attack, which is not something that has been terribly, common in the last couple of years, especially under Gio. So you see the areas that they want that future DP to be. And at the same time, they're turning the different knobs with the different midfielders. If it were Eric in that situation, and they have put Eric in that situation where he plays a little bit further back and is more defensive oriented, but is still involved in the attack
position.
It doesn't work as well. And just given the the challenges that he faces as a defensive midfielder, and some of the limitations I think that he might face compared with whoever this sort of two-way midfielder is that you're thinking of signing, it does make sense to turn the knob in that way, because you have Evander in his more natural position, and then you have a position as a 6 or 8 where you don't necessarily think that he can fit what you need defensively in that area.
And the Timbers also have Santiago Moreno, who can play in that 10 role as well, and wants to play in that 10 role. And I think it makes sense to have him. He just profiles as sort of a hybridized guy who you can either play inside or pull out to the wing.
Yeah, especially if you like what you're getting from Anthony, and you want to give Anthony some looks. You're gonna, if you want Moreno on the field, which I know that the Timbers do as often as they can, Anthony's gonna get in there too.
And so I think it makes sense. And the other thing that sort of factors into this is that Cristian Paredes really hasn't this year. He's had some good performances, but he really hasn't sort of kind of seized that spot. He hasn't said, sort of made the case of, okay, if Diego Chara is no longer a full-time player, I have to be in there, right? With Ayala. Ayala has kind of made that case, right? He's sort of made the point of like, I'm in, like I'm on the field.
Yeah.
Paredes hasn't. It's crazy that way. And so that's why there is just this kind of like, if you're looking for a place to reinforce the team, this is a pretty natural spot. And I'm a big believer in building teams from the spine out. And that's what this move would be. So I think this makes, frankly, a lot more sense. There was several weeks back, there was some rumblings that the Timbers were going to go out and spend a DP spot or maybe a young DP spot on, or a U22 spot on another attacker. And I don't think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Simply because I mean, the attack looks fantastic. That's just not where the money is well spent. Where the Timbers have had some frailties, and those frailties include this last week or two, has been in their spine, right? Has been in their ability to be broken down and to concede. And, I think there are some things that you can do on the back line that maybe would help that. But I think the biggest thing, I actually think the depth chart at center back isn't bad. And I think the biggest thing you can do is reinforce the spine to help solidify your structure. So this makes a lot more sense to me, frankly, than going out and signing a DP number 9 when Felipe Mora is filling it up, when Jonah Rodriguez is filling it up. I don't see the value add there.
Yeah, Mora is healthy and he's playing some of the best soccer of his career, and he fits extremely well with Evander and Jonathan Rodriguez in that trio that they have up there. So, it would have made sense to maybe add a little depth there so that you in terms of the striker spot. Yeah, but depth, not a big money guy. And so, I think credit is due to the Timbers front office for pursuing something like this, because it on the surface doesn't seem like the easiest, most obvious thing when you have as much talent in the central midfield as you do. But to work with Phil Neville and to see these sort of, bits and pieces here and there and these knobs that you want to turn for the lineup to get you where you want to be, which is MLS Cup contention. That's what you have to do. And it's crazy too. You were mentioning before that Ajala is sort of the only one that's the in-pin starter. At the start of the year, when we were looking at this team, we were like, how are they going to get minutes for Ajala? Christian Paredes obviously had a great year last year. Eric was coming back, and we knew that he was fully healthy. Diego Chara, at the start of the year, we knew obviously his age was going to be a factor.
And he's still a good player. He's still a productive player.
He's still a great player. He's extremely in good shape. He's got great pace, but it's for his age at this point. It's the sort of thing that you're not killing the sacred cow. You're just, moving it to a different part of the pasture sometimes.
And it sounds like eating the Timbers grass. Are looking younger at the 6-8 spot. And that's exactly how you want. I mean, those are exactly the conditions in which you want to bring in a young, high upside player into a central position like this, right? It's sort of we can use you, but we don't desperately need you. We're not gonna be shoving you into the starting lineup from week 1 because we can't win without you. We're bringing you in. You're a big part of the plans. You have a very clear role in the plans, but we've got some runway for you to get comfortable, for you to get your life settled, for you to get sort of familiar with our system and familiar with your teammates. We've got some runway because we've got Diego Chara, who's a club legend and is still playing good soccer, even if it's not at the level that made him a club legend. We've still got Christian Paredes, who is, even though he hasn't sort of grabbed that bull by the horns, he's still a very serviceable MLS player in central midfield. And we've got a guy who we really believe in David Ajala. So, I think these are the ideal conditions to bring in a younger player who they expect to be the lockdown in that role for the foreseeable future, but don't need him to be immediately. That's ideal. And I think it could yield returns in the short and medium term, but it could especially yield returns in the long term.
Timbers sitting right now in 5th in the MLS standings, 33
Western
points.
Conference standings.
The MLS Western Conference standings, with 33 points, just ahead of Vancouver and Seattle. A lot of talk, and we can get into this on future podcasts as the season progresses, but a lot of talk about the Timbers being the next best team outside of that top 3 in the West.
We'll
a move like that central midfielder, maybe that solidifies something like that, and maybe it brings them to new heights. But like you said, they have the sort of runway for that person to get adjusted, because even great players take some serious time to adjust. We saw it with Evander. We see it all the time.
And it's especially true with young players.
It's a different animal.
Look, in terms of whether the Timbers are the best outside of sort of the LA Galaxy, LAFC, RSL triumvirate at the top of the West, I think if they want to make a serious claim to that position, or if they want to try to challenge to be at least on form, if not necessarily in the table on par with those top 3, they've just got to defend better, more consistently. And look, I mean, this last stretch of games kind of has some warning shots on that. Yes, the comeback against Minnesota was exciting, but it also had to be a comeback. And that's kind of reminiscent of what we saw early in the year. They went down to FC Dallas, a team that's been playing better since making a coaching change, and they shipped 3 to an FC Dallas team that I think is finding its way in the attack, but isn't like an attacking juggernaut.
You want to talk about curses, though? Texas.
Yeah. I mean, the state of Texas is not the Timbers' favorite. But look, I mean, you look at those games, and I think you see where things still need to get better. And especially as you get to the playoffs, you can't be doing that, right? I mean, you can't be conceding goals like that, because the games just get so game statey in the playoffs that if you're digging yourselves into a hole in games, they're just so much harder to get out of than they are in regular season games that don't quite have those same swings and those same dynamics. And so, I mean, as games get tighter, as the season gets later, and as you get toward the playoffs, the Timbers have got to clean that up. And I think looking back at the last couple of weeks, I think you can look at those couple of weeks and say that they're better. They're manifestly better than they were when they were, on that 10-11 game winless streak. But they've still got to get better if they want to be shoot, right? If they want to do something that'll be remembered. They've still got a ways to go.
For sure. I do agree with you. I think there's been a lot of progress on that front. Progress is not always a straight line when it comes to developing, especially on that end. But I do think that there is definitely room, and Phil Neville would probably be the first to say, definitely a lot of room to continue to improve on that front. Shifting gears to the Portland Thorns, who have been a little bit less busy than our pals, the Timbers, since our last podcast, but still a little busy, still a couple of games to talk about, and then a little transfer market situation to discuss. Oops, all keepers, as they say. So beginning with the games, 0-0 draw at Utah. A grinder.
I don't know if there's
when it probably shouldn't have been. Not a lot to say about that game, other than maybe it was a bit underwhelming, because Utah is a terrible team, and despite getting a result that was viewed as positive for the club, they fired their coach after that game. So things aren't exactly going great down there in Sandy, Utah, but. A 1-0 win over San Diego was a bit of a bounce upward, if not all the way back for the Thorns.
During a period in which San Diego is just going full Hindenburg.
They are, and it's the style that San Diego plays lends itself to a sort of grinder, to use that term again. I mean, it's just I took some friends to that game. That was their first Thorns game, and for much of it, it wasn't a lot to look at, and you hate to do that. You hate to show people something that you like and you think is interesting, and it turns out to be a little bit more boring than you even expected. But that was just the nature of that game. Of course, Izzy D'Aquila's goal late in that game, everybody was hyped, so that was a lot of fun for all folks in attendance. But great for the Thorns to get the win, even if, as we talked a little bit about off air. It seems like the team heading into this Olympic break has plateaued a little bit, to the point where, we talked a lot during the win streak at the start of Rob Gale's tenure about him making a really strong case for himself to be a candidate for the head coaching position. And I think he still definitely is. But I think that the settling of this season for the Thorns and the very obvious deficiencies they've had in facing some of the top tier clubs in NWSL lends itself to the idea that you definitely want to, be looking for some high level names. Casey Stoney's one that we talked about recently, Mark Parsons and others that are potentially available out there. But whatever happens with Gail, whatever happens with the head coaching position, it seems that the Thorns have sort of reached this bit of a plateau before the Olympic break, with some serious questions to answer once all the players come back.
I mean, I think where they've sort of settled and they've just not really escaped this tier is, there's the top tier, which is KC and Orlando. There's maybe a little second tier that Gotham is looking a bit better. Maybe Washington's in there. I don't know. I probably wouldn't put him in there. And then there's like kind of if that's like tier 2A, the tier 2B is kind of where the Thorns are right now. And Rob Gale came in and he stabilized a lot of things that were really unstable, right? And that needed to happen. That was really critical because the Thorns were getting outrun in track meets over and over and over again. And that's just, it was not working. And so he kind of did the initial job that needed to be done, and he did it well, and credit to him for doing that. But then there's kind of like another gear that you need to be able to shift the team into that I just don't think they've hit, which is kind of reestablishing their identity. And their identity right now is not making a lot of mistakes and letting Sophia Smith do stuff. And that's not like the worst identity in the world. Like, that's not the worst plan.
You can win a lot of games,
and they have won a lot of games doing that. So, I'm not saying that that's like the worst thing in the world, but it's not going to get him into that top tier, and it probably won't even get him into that kind of 2A tier. And so it feels like they've sort of just plateaued. Now they've gotten some chip-in contributions from folks like Izzy D'Aquila, and that's been great. Had a really frustrating beginning to the season for D'Aquila, and it's really nice to see her starting to find these spots where she's contributing to the attack. It's got to get more consistent, but like this is good. I mean, this is sort of what we, I think, hoped to see from D'Aquila this year, and hopefully it carries on and becomes more consistent. Missing Morgan Weaver's been a big part of it too. I mean, when you talk about the core of this team into the future, it's Sophia Smith, Morgan Weaver, and Sam Coffey. And missing one of those players is going to be something that's significant. And so that's been an issue. But, otherwise it's a team that, especially in the attack, hasn't had much identity outside of Soph's excellence. And that, I think, is increasingly a problem. That, if they don't solve, it probably is just going to end up with this year not being terrible, not a total disaster, but a little bit of a disappointment. And it'll certainly raise some questions about how they're going to sort of bump up the level going into 2025. But it seems like that's kind of where they've leveled out. And in terms of the case for Rob Gale's, months long interview, job interview, I don't think it helps it at all. I mean, I think it increasingly, I think you're getting to a place where you say he did a good job as an interim, but he sort of showed that was where he could take the team and couldn't take it further than that. And if he wants to get the job permanently, he's got to take it further than that, because there are coaches on the market who have taken teams further than that. Certainly Casey Stoney has taken teams further than that. I mean, Mark Parsons has taken the Portland Thorns further than that. And there are any number of others that you would think would be interested, especially given the reinvigoration of leadership in the club, that would be interested in coming in who have similar accomplishments to their name. And so, I think if this is as far as Gale is able to take the team, I think he probably won't get the full-time job. Now, he's got some runway yet, right? The season's not over. If he does find that other gear, then I think it becomes a different conversation. I don't think it's a situation where they feel like they have to pull the plug now, although this break does provide a kind of a convenient window if there is an A-list coach out there to be had. This Olympics break kind of it creates a convenient window in which to go out and make that move. But if that move isn't there to be made immediately, I think there's, Gale also hasn't done anything to create impetus to feel like they need to go make that move.
And the trust factor is there for them to keep him around through the end of the year if they need to, which honestly is probably
the most likely outcome. And that's one that I think makes sense and everybody would be comfortable with. But he's got more to show if he wants to get the job, the full time.
Yeah. And I think that as presently constituted and the way that this Thorns team is playing right now, I don't see them beating Kansas City in a playoff game.
I think we saw they're not close to that level.
Yeah.
That tier is clearly a tier above
exponentially. It's going to be exponentially harder for them to go out on the road and do that because one of the big advantages of the last few years for the Thorns, and that's not to say that they got lucky or were a product of those advantages. They got there because they won games. Is that they were always one of the top 2 seeds, and they would host a semifinal here in Portland every year. And it's okay, you go win one game and you're in the NWSL championship. Didn't happen last year. Obviously Gotham came here and did what they did and ended up winning the title. But it's a different landscape now. There are teams that have caught up to or surpassed Portland in terms of overall talent and, what they've been able to put together on the field. What Orlando and KC are doing is really remarkable. And I think more attention should be paid in general by sports media to what those two teams have done and what they represent in terms of the NWSL's growth. But at the same time, if you're the Portland Thorns, you're not too happy about that, even if it means the league's got more eyeballs and people are more excited and this, that, or the other. You're looking up at those teams right now. And so, what moves can they make? What, as we talked about before, dials can they turn to make that happen and to get into the postseason and give yourself a shot? You still obviously have a very talented roster, including arguably the best individual player in the league in Sophia Smith. So anything is certainly possible if you can get healthy. The Thorns are always going to be in the mix, but look, right now they are looking up and you wonder, what type of moves, if any, they can make or should make to have that be more possible for them to beat those.
They made one, although I'm not sure it's the type of move they need to make to get there, but they made one.
Yeah, they did. The one move that Chris is talking about is that the Thorns signed Australian goalkeeper Mackenzie Arnold from West Ham. Obviously one of the more talented goalkeepers in the WSL, and somebody that gets regular opportunities with the Matildas and is among the leaders of that team. So you would think, given the hype around the signing, given the fact she's signed through 26 by the Thorns, that she is somebody they're bringing in to be their regular starter at goalkeeper. That's not to say that Shelby Hogan is not going to, have a chance to, compete with her and potentially beat her out. Hogan, I think, has improved quite a bit since the start of the season. But it creates this serious logjam at a position that you don't really want one, which is goalkeeper. Bella Bixby just recently gave birth to her daughter Ruby. So congratulations to Bella and her husband. Such a awesome thing to see on Instagram one day. It just pops up. Oh, there's a new little Bixby in the world. But she'll be back on the field eventually in her road to coming back from giving birth. And, you have Hogan there and you have other names in that locker room that are going to be there. So, or at least for the rest of this season, what do you do with them? Who do you keep around? It's just a sort of weird thing to have to address. And I think the move is a good one in terms of adding like world-class talent to your team in general, but it's the goalkeeper position. And you look around this roster, a lot of talent, pretty well constructed,
some upgradable spots,
undeniably some upgradable spots. And I don't think that goalkeeper was one that I would have pinned as the top priority. And maybe that's not even what Karina LeBlanc and company view as the top priority. And they've got other stuff in the coffers here coming up. But I don't know. What was your 1,000-foot view of that, and maybe what should or could happen?
I expect Arnold after the Olympics to come in and be the starter, and probably to provide more at that position than Hogan has. I agree that Hogan sort of stabilized and really came on after a really, really rough start to the season, and to the point where, I definitely wouldn't say that Shelby Hogan was one of the better goalkeepers in NWSL over the course of the last several weeks, but she wasn't costing the Thorns games. So,
she made a big save,
and she certainly. I mean, she had a few moments, frankly, where she made pretty big saves. But that's what you expect goalkeepers to do, right? That's their job. And if you have goalkeepers who aren't pulling out those moments, then that's when you really have to make a change at the position. And so, I think Arnold will probably come in and improve what the Thorns have at that position. But that doesn't, to me, change their trajectory in 2024, because I think Hogan had stabilized the position and it made it so that it was no longer, a major liability. And, I think it gives them a path forward at the spot that they didn't previously have. But Bella Bixby has certainly had some good seasons in NWSL. And I think, you don't know how she's going to come back from parental leave, but that certainly was something that would have been one to see. And so, it sort of creates just another potential path forward at a position which they probably had one, but they also probably needed to assess. So, I think I don't quite know what to make of it. It's not the move that if they were looking to push into that top tier in 2024, I would have made. And the other thing that's really complicated about it is NWSL sort of salary cap stuff is just a total black box. And so, if the Thorns made this move and it leaves them still with flexibility to go out and make one of those moves that does change their trajectory for 2024, I'd say, cool. Okay, fine. But if it's like kind of their last shot, and we just have no idea, we have no clue.
Yeah, we literally have no idea. That's the thing. Is like you can only speak about these sort of things in speculative terms because it's as you said, a black box. It's totally the lack of transparency there is honestly kind of like
it needs to stop. Shocking. The league just needs to grow past this, because as we've seen, and as every league that has something like this has seen, that becomes part of the way that you follow the league, right? Like that's part of that. That's what people talk about. That's what people and you want that conversation to be happening. And this has been a long process to get MLS to understand this, but they've started to understand it more and more. That's part of the product.
Started is the key word, though, because MLS is still, like, comparatively to other professional sports leagues in this country is miles behind them in terms of
opaque.
That transparency.
Well, when you look at the NFL, when you look at the NBA, when you look at these more successful leagues than MLS in particular, they are all far more transparent in the salary structure and rule and all of those things. NWSL, though, is a whole nother level behind where MLS even is now. And I think that's got to change. But to some extent, if the Thorns have financial flexibility, and I kind of doubt that they do, but if they had financial flexibility to make two biggish moves in this window, and this is one of them, I'd say, okay, I can see that. You're making a move for a position in the long term that probably has some upgradability, while leaving options nonetheless open in another spot. Okay, I can see that. If it's their one shot, I'd say that wasn't the target. That wasn't where you needed to shoot that shot, because there are other places. Notably, I think I think either on the back line to bring in a really good central defender, or maybe even to I'm reluctant to say depth at fullback, but the fullback position hasn't been great still. even though they've taken a couple swings at that, I think they're probably hoping for some just internal improvement at that spot. And if you squint, maybe you can see it. But I think central defense is certainly one that they need some sort of like shovel, plug and play, ready to go improvement. And frankly, at the number 10 position, it's been a rough season largely for Olivia Moultrie. It's been a rough season for the other player who I think they wagered would be coming in to do that, and Jesse Fleming has not come in and seized that spot. And so those were the two shots to sort of do that in that position, albeit in different styles. And I think neither of them have really seized that spot. And so I think that's another pretty obvious one that the Thorns could seek to improve. I think you can make an argument for an 8. I think you can make an argument for another winger. I mean, you know, there are a number of places that I would have looked if there was the one shot before I would have gone to goalkeeper. And so we'll have to wait and see whether there's another round in Karina LeBlanc's gun, so to speak. Yeah. But if that was the one, I think it's not going to move them into that top tier.
No, definitely not this year. That answers one of the listener questions, which was the positions that you think the Thorns should target.
I did a very like Andrew Wiebe list. They're like, yeah. I could see going to a number of different places, but yeah,
literally like the whole team basically, except for the position that they signed. Getting into more of those listener questions, if you could put any Thorn or Timbers player into the head coaching position for the U.S. men's national team, barring Jurgen Klopp being hired, which I guess is
easy question. Becky Sauerbrunn. Next question.
Explored. Becky Sauerbrunn. Yeah. I mean, her connection to the U.S. women's national team, what she's meant to the country, her intelligence and ability she'll probably be a coach anyway.
I mean, she's going to be whatever she wants to be, but easy question. Becky Sauerbrunn. What's next?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good one. I actually agree with that. Did we get any money for Asprilla? Was that an amnesty deal? And then how much more playing time will T2 and academy players get this year? It's been really cool, just as a side note to the final question, to see a couple of T2 and academy guys come up through the ranks and get their opportunities this year for the first team. That's something that people had been critical of the Timbers not doing enough of in the past. And for two dudes to see the field this year, especially when Phil Neville has talked specifically about wanting to do that and emphasize that.
Done a better job with that.
It's been really cool. And then speaking to Asprilla, we want to talk about opaque and lack of transparency. We don't know. We don't know whether or not the Timbers got money or a lot of it or a little of it or whatever, what the specifics of that deal were, other than the fact he was
my guess is this one is actually fairly I think this one's fairly easy to come up with a reasonably educated guess on, that it's neither an amnesty kind of thing nor a transfer that they got money for. I think it's probably just a traditional, regular old free transfer. And Asprilla has signed a new contract with Nacional. And so that's what I would expect out of this situation. I mean, functionally it's like them saying, okay, we're mutually agreeing to walk away from your contract with the Timbers. You go sign with Atlético Nacional because you technically are under contract. We're transferring, but it's almost like a walk away kind of deal.
Right. It's sort of like we'll let you choose where you go, but in exchange, basically, like you're terminating the current deal,
and we're getting cap relief for the second half of this
year. Yeah. So it's complicated, but the number, you're never going to see that type of stuff is very
no. The one that frankly was more eyebrow raising was the Jimmy Chara deal. That they characterized as a transfer, and you're kind of like, was it? Did the Timbers eat some money there? Did they amnesty some money there? We don't really know, but it seems pretty plausible that they did. Pretty likely.
Another fun question: if you could have one Timber or one Thorn serve in your wedding party, who would they be and why? Who would have fit into the right?
I did not have a wedding party, so yeah. Kind of just flew solo. So like my answer technically is not applicable. In terms of the one, I think Diego Valeri, the guy's got some wisdom to him, right? And when you're looking for like advice in those final moments, I think Diego Valeri would be who I would turn to.
He's best man material.
Yeah. The aforementioned Becky Sauerbrunn also would be very much a candidate for many of the same reasons.
I would love Sam Coffey would be a good officiant, I think, of the wedding. She's somebody that is extremely, articulate and well spoken and could carry the evening. With
who's your
with
DJ
that ability? Maybe Juan Mosquera. How about?
All right. Ryan's wedding's going to be a good time. It's going to be wild.
He'd play whatever his favorite tunes are, which would probably be some fun stuff. Him and Santi have bumped their share of their own music in the Timbers locker room over the years that I have heard. It'd be funny. I just imagined Mosquera up there just vibing in a sort of DJ scenario. Looking through more of these questions here, we already touched on the head coach discussion with the Thorns a little bit. The Thorns have their own website.
Yeah.
As folks
2024, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. At long last, it is not thornsfc.timbers.com or whatever.
Timbers.com/thornsfc
that's even worse, right? Because it was timbers.com and then the slash indicating that it's sort of like
we did
this thing underneath they did it. They
we made it, everybody.
They have their own website. It should have happened a very long time ago. What is our best back line this week with Zoop asserting his week in and week out performances? My understanding is that I would imagine Kamal Miller will not be fully available, if available at all, coming off of
probably set for a rest.
Deep run in the Copa. Yeah, probably deserving a rest. Given his contribution for Canada. I don't know. I have enjoyed what I've seen from Zuperich over the last few games. He's somebody that seems like a solid enough and continual contributing starter. Zach McGraw has also turned his season around pretty significantly over the last few weeks and is somebody that I think deserves to continue to get those shots. He's given you what you need at that position and has not, struggled by any stretch. So, I mean, the Zuperich McGraw pairing is like a funny one off the field. And I think it has been consistently a solid one on the field with a few exceptions, just given some of the struggles that the team has had last couple of years.
I think my ideal pairing, sort of, if everybody was in there, if everybody was their best selves, my ideal pairing is Kamal Miller and Zach McGraw. Because I think Miller does a lot of the sort of the field organizational work and has the distributional skills that McGraw doesn't quite have. But McGraw, I think, is when he's at his best, is maybe the best sort of ball winner kind of center back. And so I like that dynamic as between the two. McGraw, I think, still isn't quite at the level of Zuperich, who's had just a better season in terms of form. And so in terms of, actual form, I think it's probably Miller and Zuperich for me. I think Araujo has had a solid season. But for me, he brings many of the same attributes that Miller does. And I just don't like him quite as much in terms of quality. And so, I think Miller Zuperich is going to be your likeliest sort of pairing going forward in terms of what they've shown this year. But if McGraw sort of continues his upward trajectory, I would like to see that because I conceptually like that pairing a lot. Of those two guys when they're playing at their best, I think make a lot of sense together.
And I just like having really tall guys hanging around for corners and stuff.
I mean, that's been a problem.
Yeah, it definitely has. The last one I guess we could touch on here that we haven't already gone in depth on, but maybe we did a little bit was Diego Chara becoming a super sub. is one of the specific questions. Like, is it time for him to lean into that role? I think that it's already trending in that direction for the Timbers. And I think that Diego Chara has specifically addressed how excited he is about the young players and how they have been contributing, particularly David Ayala, but also others at and not at his position. Diego's a smart guy. He wants to play until he's 40, but he knows that in doing so, he's probably not going to be a 90-minute starter that whole time. He probably this time next year won't want to be, because that stuff is,
I think he'll probably
easy.
always want to be. I think 65-year-old Diego Chara is going to be like, I want to play 90 today.
He'll be in his local.
I'd like to put
league,
a couple studs into somebody's ankle if I can.
Yeah, and give a big white smile afterwards. So I think that's already sort of where things are headed, especially with this DP signing potentially in the wings here. And I think it's probably the best thing for the Timbers. But as Chris pointed out, the bridge for the new guy is longer because you have Diego Chara, and this isn't, to utilize the previous metaphor, the killing of the sacred cow. They're like I said, they're just moving him around.
Yeah, and I also wouldn't use the phrase super sub. Usually, a super sub is going to be somebody who's in a little bit more attacking position.
Christine Sinclair in moments that comes to mind for the Thorns a little bit in that type of situation.
So I wouldn't. I think Chara would be more of a situational sub, but in terms of a guy who you'd be looking to in the 70th minute of a game, maybe in which you've got a lead, but you want to add a little bit more bite to your central midfield. Yeah, I would like Diego Chara for that role. That's a really, really nice guy to have on the bench, and who also just has experience to manage those kinds of moments in which you're getting a little bit overrun. I mean, there is going to be concern if the Timbers go younger in central midfield that they're going to be a little bit inexperienced, right? And so to have Diego Chara on the bench to bring in to help manage some of those moments, to add some more bite in the middle of the park, to help manage when opponents are throwing more numbers at the Timbers, I absolutely think that's a role that he would serve exceptionally well in. And so, I mean, there is very much a role for Diego Chara on this team, even if they bring in a DP 6'8". And even if that player comes in and commands a starting spot very quickly, there's still an important role for Diego Chara. You need that guy. I wouldn't call him a super sub, but that's a sub that you really want to have on your bench.
Yeah, and I don't think he necessarily would reach that territory more than likely until next season at the earliest, like a quote unquote super sub.
I could see it late this year
because of the bridge that you're talking about, though, right? Like the new guy, whoever it is, if they get it across the line, isn't going to be here for at least probably a few weeks. And then beyond that, his adjustment period, and beyond that, his availability, and beyond that, the quality that he's showing, everything lends itself to Diego Chara continuing to start games down the stretch for the Timbers, and to be playing pretty solid minutes, and he could still be the guy that they want in that spot for the rest of this year. It's sort of like how they, it could also be a Juan Mosquera type situation where they bring him in with 2-3 games to go, and it's like, oh, he's looking good, he's showing flashes. Same with Anthony last year. It's like, oh, nice, like he'll be good next year type of thing. It could easily be that way for this DP 6 or 8.
Yep.
So.
And so Diego Chara definitely hasn't started his last game for the Portland Timbers. Probably not close to it. He probably has several starts left in his Portland Timbers career, but there's absolutely another role for him, and it's an important role, especially as you get toward the end of the season. And when these games get tighter and get game statier, then that's a guy you would really like to be able to look down the bench and see. So I think that is if they make this signing, they get it across the line, and the player comes in and does phenomenally well immediately, that is in some respect maybe a dream scenario for the Timbers.
Definitely. That will wrap it up for us this week on Soccer Made in Portland. No mas. That was a good episode to discuss everything that's happened since we last got together here. Chris Reifer living the married life.
That's right.
Now, so much has changed.
So so much has changed. Things are good.
Things are
Life
good.
is good.
That's wonderful. life is good, folks. You can follow us on Twitter where things maybe aren't as good as the rest of life.
Not open up that can of worms.
PDX, at Ryan T. Clark and at Chris Reifer. Like, subscribe, follow Soccer Made in Portland wherever you get your pods. Oregonian Sports Podcast, subscribe to those. There will be more episodes of Ducks Confidential coming pretty soon as football season approaches for the Oregon Ducks. Camp should start in August. Some of the listeners of this pod probably don't care about that. And that's, you know what? That's okay.
You're allowed to have things you're interested in and things you aren't interested in.
Correct. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to follow.
Right. You can choose. And we thank you for choosing our podcast and getting to the point where we talk about how people have agency to choose what they like and don't like.
Exactly, man. Thank you for choosing us, everybody. We'll catch you next week.